go. All right, well, thank you everyone for coming out tonight to Sustainable Claremont's Dialogue series. We have a really exciting speaker and a really exciting and important topic that we're going to be covering tonight. Before we get into our conversation, a couple of really brief announcements. First is that tomorrow evening, we're going to be having a conversation with the folks at the Pomona Valley United Nations Association at 7:00 p.m. They're sort of doing like a follow-up to the COP26 conference over in Glasgow. And we're trying to lead a conversation on some of the things that we can all do here back in Claremont and the surrounding communities as a follow-up to the COP26 conference and sort of where we go from here type conversation. So that should be really fun. Richard Haskell, one of our board members, and several students from the Claremont colleges and Claremont High School will be attending and all giving their insight into some of the things we could do to look forward. We have a link for that we'll be posting in the chat box. So please feel free to follow that link and register for tomorrow's conversation. This Friday, we also are going to be meeting at the Packing House. So our friends Kevin and Heather Meyer-Gonzalez, who run the Claremont Gallery, every Friday night over in the Packing House, are going to be focusing on local sustainability. So Sustainable Claremont and our good friends over at Uncommon Good and Cal BG, we're all going to be tabling there alongside the artists from 6:00 to 9:00. And we would love if you would come by. We're going to have some good swag and stickers and t-shirts to give away. And it would be great to see some of you in person since it's been so long since we've had one of those events. So please come. That's Friday night from 6 to 9 at the Packing House. We have a lot of upcoming dialogues in the next few weeks. We have another really great one on water. We have one on our urban forests and foraging. We have one on a whole host of topics. I think we have 3 or 4 in the next 6 weeks or so. So please be sure to sign up for our newsletter if you're not already on that list so that you could keep abreast of these upcoming talks and know how to join us when we do have those. So let's shift gears to our speaker. Just as we always do these online conversations, feel free to put your questions in the chat box as they come up during the conversation. And during Rebecca's presentation, myself and my colleague Nicole will be grabbing those questions and we could ask Rebecca those questions at the end. If you'd prefer to ask her yourself, you can hold on to those questions. And once her presentation has completed, we'll be calling on some people from the audience to go ahead and ask Rebecca directly. And Rebecca, if you see any of those questions come in while you're presenting, please feel free to field them if it seems like a natural spot, or we could grab them all at the end. Okay, so without further ado, let me introduce our amazing speaker tonight. So Rebecca Kimitch is the press office manager for the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, where she helps reporters understand the engineering, science, and policies behind bringing water to Southern California. She also helps the public understand the value of their water and the need to use it efficiently. Before starting at Metropolitan 5 years ago, she was a Pulitzer Prize-winning newspaper reporter in Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., and Costa Rica for 15 years. We're super excited to have Rebecca with us tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and, Rebecca, make you host right now, and I'll let you take it away from here.
All right. Let's see. Let me see. All right. Did that work?
It worked. Yeah.
It's all right. Always the deal. All right. So thank you for having me. I am going to start by sharing a little bit about Metropolitan and kind of the big picture water supply, where Southern California gets its water. And then we'll get into some details about immediate challenges of drought and then the longer term challenges of climate change. And then we can talk a little bit about what Metropolitan is doing to address some of these issues and what you can do to help us work through some of these challenges that we have. Let's see. A little different. Here we go. Advance. Okay, so Metropolitan Water District is the nation's largest water wholesaler. What does that mean? What does it mean to be a water wholesaler? You'd be forgiven for not knowing what Metropolitan is or what a water wholesaler is. What it means is we sell water to other water agencies, and not to the public directly. Our customers, we have 26 member agencies who are customers, and our customer here locally is Three Valleys Municipal Water District, who is also a wholesaler. They in turn sell water to Golden State, who delivers it to us at our doorsteps. And you may wonder why so many water agencies, right? And I often used to wonder the same thing when I was a reporter. The way that I have come to understand it, or best like to explain it, is it's kind of like transportation. You know, you've got your big freeway systems, and that's Metropolitan. We're the ones who bring water into Southern California, and then you have your kind of state arteries, and that's Three Valleys. They're bringing water from these big arteries into the San Gabriel Valley, Claremont region, and then of course Golden State brings it to your front door. So, you know, you wouldn't want your freeway system delivering these, bringing these huge, you know, giant pipes right to your front door. That's what, you know, Metropolitan's pipes and systems are. You could drive a truck through them. This is really huge stuff. So it does in fact require these layers of bureaucracy. The other thing I'll say about Metropolitan is, you know, we are also highly involved in the treatment of water. We've got 5 of the nation's largest water treatment plants. So, you know, we're really involved. We've got state-of-the-art water quality labs. So really involved in ensuring the water quality for the region. We also, a few decades ago, built the Southern California's largest storage reservoir in Diamond Valley Lake. And there's real value, I think, that comes to Southern California by having a large agency like Metropolitan working with the region. We're able to pool resources and make these big investments that, quite honestly, have really helped the region get through this drought and weather this drought better than some of the rest of the state. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. So where does Southern California get its water? About 30% of this is all on average, and it really varies from year to year, but on average, about 30% of Southern California's water comes from the State Water Project. And that's water that's delivered from the Northern Sierra, from the Sacramento and Feather Rivers, down through the State Water Project to us here in Southern California. Another 25% comes from the Colorado River. And then about 45% is local supplies. So just over half is imported, and then another 45% is the other half is local. I will point out that of that local supplies, we at Metropolitan count the Los Angeles Aqueduct. That's what delivers water from the Eastern Sierra, from the Owens Valley, to LA DWP. So some people may not consider that local, but we at Metropolitan do for our purposes. But you know, for you all, it's important to recognize that even more than that 55% is actually coming from outside of the region. The other thing that I'll point out here is that the groundwater portion of local supplies, that amounts to about a third. Groundwater is about a third of Southern California's water. And, you know, I'm going to talk a lot about imported supplies and the challenges to imported supplies, but I think it's important to recognize that there's some significant challenges to our groundwater resources as well. There's a lot of, you know, constituents of emerging concern and things with groundwater that we could talk a lot about, or that you could have, you know, some other experts in to talk more about. But the other thing is that a lot of our groundwater basins are overdrafted. There's some natural replenishment that happens, but and then there's some replenishment that happens through recycled water and through imported supplies. But there's about a 2% gap in that replenishment. So they're being slowly depleted. So there's challenges there as well. All right, so I'm gonna get into this a little bit more later, but before we move on, I do want to point out that those averages are historic. That's what they have been. We're trying to move away from that. Metropolitan is making a lot of investments in conservation and local resources so that those become a bigger piece of the pie. And again, we'll talk about this a little bit more in a little bit, but I also want to point out that even, you know, looking ahead, even with the investments in local resources and imports, local resources and conservation, we're always, at least for the foreseeable future, for the next few generations, going to be relying on these imported supplies. They just provide a significant portions of the region's water, and even with large investments in local resources and conservation, they're going to continue to be an important part of our supply portfolio. All right, so even before we start talking about climate change, there are challenges that we face in providing water reliability for California and Southern California. The California has just huge variability in precipitation. You look at the rest of the nation, it's like a 20% range in variability. In California, it's like 70%. So it's kind of a feast or famine state. We have really wet years and really dry years. And that's how it's always been. It's just our climate, and it's a challenge. And it really kind of points to the value of storage. But more than any other part of the country, there's just huge variability in Southern California supplies. And that is going to get worse with climate change, but it's always been a challenge. And then the other big challenge is that our population is not located where our water is, right? We're half of our population is here in Southern California, and you know, most of the rain and snow is in the Northern Sierra. So that's just, you know, just an innate you know, challenge and function of getting the region water. And then of course there's drought. So California has experienced 10 multi-year droughts over the past 100 years. So we just, you know, we have these droughts that regularly hit. Lately, it's been like one per governor, and they're gonna keep coming. So, you know, there's every indication, of course, that the droughts are going to continue, and with climate change, they are going to become increasingly severe. So what does climate change mean for Southern California's water supplies? So first, let on the Colorado River, increased temperatures in the Colorado River Basin mean that there'll be less snow and more demand from trees and plants. So you're kind of getting hit from both sides. There's less supply, and there's going to be more demand from the natural environment. So all of that will result in less flow in the Colorado River. And it already is resulting in less flow in the Colorado River. And then in the Sierra Nevada, the climate models are a little less precise. They're not exactly showing less precipitation necessarily. What the models show now is that there won't necessarily be less precipitation, but there will be, the precipitation that falls will fall more as rain and less as snow, and more as rain in really big storms. So we've kind of seen some of that over the past couple of years with these big atmospheric rivers and these big monster storms that you're hearing about. That is how we're going to see our precipitation falling. So it may not be less, but it's falling in a very different way than what we've seen in the past. Sierra snowpack is expected to decrease by 65% over the next century. And that's huge. The Sierra snowpack is California's largest reservoir. That's how we historically have managed our water supplies. The snow falls, it stays in the Sierra and melts in the summer when we need it, and that's it. It's just it's how it's naturally worked. That is changing. That is not how we are going to be able to continue managing our water supplies in the future. And that's critical, and it's going to be a really big challenge. And then locally, like I mentioned, with groundwater basins, there's just not the same amount of replenishment that, or there won't be the same amount of replenishment through local supplies that we've seen historically. And there's also, with rising sea levels, a larger challenge with saltwater intrusion in some of our groundwater basins. So we're already seeing this, right? I'm going to throw some records at you. So the top two hottest years on records in California were in 2015 and in 2021. Water year 2020-21, and that the water year ends in October, was the second driest year in California. But in the middle of the last drought, which had all these records that we heard about, and in the middle, and then this drought, where we're again breaking records left and right, we had one of the wettest years. So 2017 was like the third wettest year for the entire state, and the wettest year in what is called the 8-station index, which is the precipitation in the Northern Sierra. So wettest, like historically wet year in 2017. So again, you're seeing these extremes that we've seen before, but they're just becoming more extreme. And this slide here illustrates exactly the challenges that we're going to face. And this is actually something that experts didn't expect to see for a while. They anticipated this was coming, but these numbers here are something that they really didn't expect to see for at least a decade. And that's that 70% snowpack in 2021. That wasn't terrible, right? They ended the year with 72% snowpack. Not great, but not terrible. But the runoff was only 38%. And same in the Colorado River Basin, 88% snowpack, 33% water year runoff. Now, what's happening here? It has become so hot and so dry that the snow is what snow and precipitation comes is either evaporating right away or it's soaking into these really dry soils. So again, climate experts expected to see this, but they didn't expect to see this so quickly. So water is not making it into the rivers that we have historically relied on. So in the immediate term, things are not looking good. And Richard, we were talking a little bit about how bleak this is looking for next year. This year on the State Water Project, and again, that's the system that brings us water from Northern California. We had what is called a 5% allocation. And what that means is that the water agencies that contract water from the State Water Project got only 5% of their contracted water amounts, and gets a little bit wonky. You never get 100% of your contracted water amount, but a 5% allocation is really low. We had never had a 5% allocation before until the last drought. And when it happened in the last drought, the state said, this is so unusual. This is not going to happen again. This is really unusual. And here we are, next drought with a 5% allocation. And that's less than a month's worth of average. Again, you never get 100% allocation. Well, not usually, sometimes you do, but it's not often to get 100% allocation, but 5% means less than an average, 1 month's of average supply that we get from the State Water Project. So it's really, really low supplies for us. And next year, it's looking like it's going to be a 0% allocation to start the year. Now, it probably won't, hopefully won't stay at 0%, but Lake Oroville is at a historic low. It reached its lowest level ever earlier this year. It's come up a little bit because of one of those big monster storms, but it's the conditions on the State Water Project are pretty unprecedented, and we can talk a little bit more about this if we have time later. But getting into the particulars of this drought, I want to talk a little bit more big picture. But these are conditions we've never seen before in the state. So and then on the Colorado River, similarly. Unprecedented conditions. First ever shortage was declared on the Colorado River, which means Lake Mead has reached, again, historically low levels. That hasn't had an immediate effect for Southern California because of water rights on the Colorado River. But that said, there's likely the levels of Lake Mead continue to drop as well. The difference with the Colorado River supplies versus the State Water Project supplies is that there's just a much greater storage on the Colorado River. So that is a slower moving challenge than the State Water Project. There's like in Lake Mead, which is where we store our water on the Colorado River, it's like the capacity is like 26 million acre feet, whereas in Lake Oroville, it's only 3.5 million acre feet. So Lake Mead is just so much bigger that when you face these challenges, they're much less acute than on the State Water Project. When the State Water Project has these challenges, the storage amounts mean that they become, the problems become acute very, very quickly. All right, so you know, we've seen kind of an escalating drought response from the state and from Metropolitan. In July, Governor Newsom issued an executive order calling for 15% voluntary conservation. In August, Metropolitan, my agency, declared a regional water supply alert condition for Southern California. That's kind of our second most severe declaration. It's calling for regional conservation measures. And then in October, the Governor Newsom expanded his drought declaration to the entire state and included Southern California. Southern California had kind of been excluded because we were weathering things a little bit better than the rest of the state. But because these conditions on the State Water Project have become so severe, the governor expanded the declaration for Southern California as well. And then last week, Metropolitan declared a drought emergency, which is another tool that we have to urge our member agencies to start implementing voluntary and mandatory conservation measures. Hold on. So I mentioned how Southern California has weathered the drought a little bit better than the rest of the state, and there's a reason for that, and that's largely because of our investments in storage. So, you know, we are in this severe situation on the State Water Project, but Metropolitan and Southern California does have the benefit of diverse supply. So there are parts of the state that only rely on the State Water Project for their water. Metropolitan and most of Southern California has the State Water Project, Colorado River, and then these local supplies that we discussed. So having those diverse supplies, we've been able to kind of turn off our reliance on the State Water Project and really turn to the Colorado River. And again, Colorado River faces its own challenges, but those challenges are much less acute right now. We still have a lot of storage in Lake Mead that we can rely on. So Southern California has been able to turn to those supplies. We've also been able to put a record amount of water into storage. At the end of 2020, we had 3.2 million acre feet in storage, record amount. We are now turning to that storage now in this drought. And at the end of this year, we'll have about 2.6 million acre feet. But again, big investments in storage, and those have been really valuable during this drought. The other thing that's really important to note is that we've been able to put a lot of this water into storage because of lower demands among Southern Californians. So we're seeing a lot of just an increased efficiency, you know, conservation as a way of life ethic among Southern Californians. That's really remarkable, and demands have been low, which is great for our ability to put this water in storage. And I'll just point out here, 2020 was actually the beginning of the drought. As many of you may know, we were still able to put water into storage, and that's because of these low demands, which is just, I mean, we had a 25% State Water Project allocation, again, going back to those kind of wonky numbers, 20% State Water Project allocation, which is also low. But because of these low demands, we were able to put just a little bit of water into storage last year, which is really, really helpful and really remarkable and speaks to Southern Californians. So looking at, you know, well, just a few of these numbers, population has increased by 4 million in Southern California, but water use has decreased. And then here's another way of illustrating that. Our per capita potable water use has really decreased since 1985, when it was 210 gallons per person per day, and now it's down to 127. Now there's still room for improvement, and we'll talk about that in a sec, but it's pretty remarkable, and you'll see that there hasn't been that much uptick. There has been a little uptick since the last drought, but a lot of those things that we all learned from Governor Brown's you know, big conservation call have been maintained, and you know, we did a big push to remove turf removal and get folks to plant more sustainable landscaping, and that has been really beneficial for the region's overall water use. So let's see. Those are, we're managing through these droughts through some of those tools, but looking ahead with climate change, we're gonna require a lot more in terms of both increased water use efficiency or lower demands, and then also some investments in our different supplies. So we have a lot to do in both the short term and the long term. And the unprecedented conditions of our state water project and what's happened. So first, I'll say the unprecedented conditions on the state water project mean that in the immediate term, you're going to hear more calls for conservation. And you'll be hearing, again, stronger, perhaps mandated conservation depending on whether there's storms that come in the next couple of months. There could be some pretty significant mandated conservation. And then in the long term, there's some investments that need to be made in some of these resources. So on the Colorado River, what that is kind of looks like is we're working with all our partners on the Colorado River to incentivize conservation in ag and in urban use. So we're working a lot with farmers in doing seasonal land fallowing programs, other different kinds of fallowing programs, or partial land fallowing programs. So we're working a lot with our partners on the Colorado River. Everybody knows that the Colorado River is not in a sustainable state. Climate change aside, even pre the conditions that climate change is bringing to the river, it wasn't in a supply-demand balance at all. So everybody is aware of that. Everybody has been working for these solutions for some time, but that's not to say that it won't be a challenge to actually get some of these. We take steps, and then things get worse, and then you got to take new steps, and then things get worse, and then you got to find new ways. So it's always you're always trying to catch up. But nonetheless, everybody. There was a time when things on the Colorado River were solved through lawsuits and litigation and court battles, and now you're seeing a lot more cooperation, a lot more partnerships. More and more, we're working with our colleagues to develop agreements to try to bring the river into a more sustainable condition. On the State Water Project, those climatic changes that I talked about, storms coming as big rain instead of snow, that is one of the big reasons that Metropolitan backs and supports the Delta Conveyance Project, the single tunnel. It is viewed as a climate change resilient investment to capture stormwater when it falls and move it into storage, recognizing that we won't be able to rely on snowfall anymore. And then big thing is investing in local supplies. And I mentioned this before, but we continue to make these big investments in local supplies and in increased conservation. And I'll just, look at this, run through these very quickly. We've always been investing in local supplies, largely recycled water, but we will continue to do so. And my colleague is going to be here in a few weeks talking about our big investment, which is in our regional recycled water program, which is kind of a game changer for Metropolitan. We are a water importer, but and I don't want to steal my colleague Rupam's show, but we've always been a water importer, but we are now considering making a huge investment in a local water supply project. What would be one of the largest water recycling facilities in the world. We are on the verge of investing. We've developed a demonstration facility, and so Metropolitan is kind of using its regional resources, pooling our resources, using our scale to develop this really, really large project. And again, Rupam will be here in a couple of weeks for those of you who want to get details about that. But that's really our kind of signature investment in local water supplies, while we also continue to invest in smaller projects as well. And then, I think this is kind of where I'll wrap up here as we continue as we're investing in these local supply projects and in ensuring the reliability of our imported supplies, we're also investing in you, in the public, to make changes and become more water efficient. And one of the things, there's kind of two different kinds of conservation that we talk about a little bit. One of them is the kind of immediate conservation that we need right now, which is, when Newsom calls for 15% conservation, that's right now. We want you to drop your water use immediately 15%. It's voluntary, but that's the call. And how do you do that immediately? Well, you do that with things like shorter showers, with looking, if you do still have grass, looking and saying, hey, given that it's cooler, instead of watering 3 days a week, I can water 2 days a week, or instead of watering 2 days a week, I can water 1 day a week. Really making sure that your nozzles are facing your grass and not watering your sidewalk. Things like that can be done right away. Those can immediately drop your water use. There's also other things that are more about long-term conservation as a way of life, making your life and your home more water efficient over the long term. And those are investments that I've got here on this slide, which are our turf replacement program continues, and that's a $2 rebate that you can get per square foot of lawn converted. And these aren't easy projects. We have a lot of resources aside from the rebate. We have a lot of resources on our website, bewaterwise.com, to help you through these kind of projects. And again, we recognize they're not easy. So this is more of a long-term type project. We're not going to get our 15% conservation that we need immediately by folks doing this, because it takes a few months, right? Same with washers and dryers and installing a new toilet. We recognize that these are investments that folks have to make, and we've got rebates for them, but these are the longer term water efficiency tools that we hope folks will take advantage of. And if you can do it immediately, fantastic. It will certainly help, but we're also we're making a call for both, for making some of these lifestyle changes long term, but also kind of some of these urgent reductions in water use. So just kind of the takeaways here. This is record-breaking drought that we're seeing, and it's largely due to climate change. So we all need to use water more efficiently, and we're here to help you do that. Metropolitan is, Three Valleys is, they've got different programs as well. And we're also making investments kind of longer term in water supplies, local water supplies, and then shoring up our imported supplies. So I think that's all I have here. Yep, there we go.
All right, great. Thanks for that, Rebecca. That was super enlightening. And I think we have a bunch of questions for you, or at least I do. And we have some of the chat box. So I'm going to kind of work my way through some of the questions in the chat box, and please feel free to drop yours in there as well if you have any on your mind or that you've jotted down. And we'll do our best to make our way through as many of these as we have time for. The first is from Bob Hale, and he asks, if local aquifer replenishment, sometimes called recharge, were improved by a few percent, depletion would cease, would it not? That would seem like a very easy target to me. So that's from Bob Hale. And so can you talk about that? You said that there was like a 2% gap between.
Yeah, and I got to be honest, groundwater is far from my area of expertise, and I apologize. But yeah, so there's a 2% gap right now. About 60% of groundwater recharge is through natural replenishment. And that's just passive natural replenishment. The rest is through imported supplies that are used for active replenishment. Three Valleys, I believe Three Valleys, and actually I shouldn't say that for certain, but I believe Three Valleys purchases water from Metropolitan in part for groundwater replenishment. And then there's also recycled water is used for groundwater replenishment. And then there's stormwater capture that's used for replenishment. So all of those are used for replenishment. And I may have a breakdown of the specifics of it, but there is a gap. And I think that's on average. I think every groundwater basin in the region has particular conditions, and certainly increasing that would certainly help. But I think it's also important to recognize that some of that replenishment is coming from imported supplies.
So is that seen as like an attractive area to be working on for?
Well, I think groundwater storage is absolutely something that that is important, absolutely. But I think part of the question is where does that water come from, right? So if you're going to replenish, where does that replenishment come from? When it comes to stormwater capture, some of those projects, there is certainly funding, and I know that you guys are aware of some of this funding that's out there for stormwater capture projects. Stormwater capture projects have multiple benefits, including in terms of that that going down the storm drain and ending up in the ocean. So there's the replenishment benefits for it, given the cost. We're actually studying right now. Metropolitan has some pilot programs to study kind of the replenishment value of some of those projects, given their high cost. So there's that, and then there's the opportunity for replenishment to come through recycled water, which is again something that Rupam will talk a lot about in a couple of weeks. That is really a big opportunity. Now we're also looking. Our project looks at is looking beyond that in terms of more direct use of recycled water rather than using it just for replenishment, because there's advantages to that as well. So yeah, absolutely. I think what we look a lot at Metropolitan is groundwater, the opportunities for groundwater storage. We're constantly really looking for opportunities to store water because of just the kind of feast or famine that you see in the state. So, but it takes a lot of time to get water into the ground when you're doing it actively. It takes some time to get into the ground. Great.
We have another question from Bob, and I'm going to sort of attach my own question to it as well. He asks, how is the 5% allocation decided when you were speaking about the how MWD allocated 5% of the contracted water to some of the partner agencies? I might be getting that.
Yeah, no, it's kind of two different. Well, I used the word allocation when I talked about Metropolitan, but it's different. That 5% allocation is from the state. It's the state that determines. The state assesses the supply conditions on the state water project. They look at the conditions in the Delta. They look at the conditions in Oroville, what the reservoir conditions, what the needs for fish species are in terms of, this is again, not my area, but they assess a lot of different things, including what the reservoir levels are, what the reservoir temperatures are, what the needs of fish species are, and they make a determination on how much water they can deliver through the state water project. And again, it's only in very wet years that those conditions would get to 100%, but it is very unusual for it to be 5%. So and there's different the biological opinions that kind of dictate how the state water project is operated determine a lot, or are one of the inputs in this decision making. And there's of course a lot of different science that goes into those biological opinions. So there's a lot. There's a lot of variables that go into it, but it's set by the state.
Got it. Great. Thanks for that. And then another question by Nancy Marr. What happened regarding the proposed twin tunnel project?
So that has been reduced to a single tunnel. Governor Newsom, when he was elected, took a look at the project, and his administration determined that a single tunnel was a better route to go, and that's what they're pursuing. And there's some environmental review that's happening with that project right now. So Delta Conveyance is still there. It's just a single tunnel now.
To change the name. Okay. Great. And then Bob Garricky asks, at a recent meeting of Active Claremont, the manager of Three Valley MWD said he does not encourage gray water recycling because it's too expensive and doesn't produce enough water. And then Bob asks if you agree with that statement.
I don't really know enough about it, so I don't have an opinion, and I apologize for that. I will say that, you know, I think there's a lot of probably lower hanging fruit. I mean, I know that, you know, for folks in Sustainable Claremont, you guys may have all, you know, personally tackled a lot of the low hanging fruit. But I do think, you know, when we at Metropolitan look at ways that that we can support the public in the efficient use of water, you know, there's things that folks can do that that are really low cost and that save a lot of water, and then there's things that folks can do that, you know, maybe don't save as much as water, but kind of keep you on your toes and keep you aware, like rain barrels and rain cisterns. You know, it doesn't really rain, you know, we don't have that much local rainwater to capture all the time, but when you have one, you just have heightened awareness of your water use and you're thinking about it, and it remains top of mind. So something like that. Now, does gray water fit into that category? I don't know. I guess my point is that there's, you know, you sometimes look at kind of the cost per acre foot of water saved. And that's a really important thing when you talk about investing in conservation tools, but you also have to look at kind of the kind of that top of mind thing. And same with like turf removal. You know, turf removal, it does save a lot of water, but it's expensive. But it also gets other folks to think about it. You know, when you walk past a beautiful sustainable garden with California natives and you see, you know, the butterflies and the hummingbirds and just how lovely it can be, you think, oh, well, maybe I can do that too. So it kind of has a value. There's a cost to water agencies that invest in those kind of rebate programs and conservation programs that have, you know, benefits, kind of reciprocal benefits that last. It's kind of a tough one.
All right, great. Thanks for speaking to that. I've got my own question here really quick, and then we'll jump back to the chat box. So as you were presenting, it was like a mental roller coaster. Like at first, everything's obviously like terrible and the conditions are really challenging right now. And then, you know, your slide on water storage seemed like really encouraging. And so that seemed really hopeful. But then I also have the current US drought monitor conditions map up on my windows right now, and straight back to challenging and discouraging. Yeah. So I guess like this kind of goes back to one of Bob's questions about how like these numbers are thought up or presented to the public. And I feel like one of the big successes in the past, however long, decade plus, has been water conservation, you know, among Californians. But the situation seems so dire, and like a 15% voluntary reduction seems like so minimal. Like, I mean, it's not nothing, but do you feel like that sends like the strong enough message of what like a challenge we're facing, and like, or that, you know, people even know that this is being asked of them? Sorry, that was a lot in there.
Yeah, no, well, I think the situation is dire, but I also think it's important to remember that we do have water, right? We haven't run out of water. So, I mean, the state water project conditions are significant. There's no doubt about that. But, you know, in Southern California, particularly, you know, the Colorado River flows are not what we thought they were. The allocations were made, and again, I'm using that word allocation, which has a different term on the Colorado River, but apportionments I'll use were made on the Colorado River based on flows that aren't what they are today. But there's still water, there's still snow, there's still, you know, we still have water resources, and that's part of what we do at Metropolitan, right? And part of what we are trying to do is drought proof the region. We talk, you know, Rupam will be here in a few weeks, my colleague, talking about our recycled water project. and we call it drought proofing the region, and different water agencies have made different investments in those kind of drought proof supplies like water recycling or desal. And so the idea is that we as water managers don't want to have to tell people, we need you to urgently cut 15%. We know folks will do it. Californians have stepped up. Like it's remarkable and it's great to see. But as water managers, we don't want to have to do that, right? We want to plan and prepare for conditions such that we can provide water under various extreme conditions. Now, you're never going to be able to, you don't want to overinvest, right? You have to. We're at Metropolitan. We're in the middle of our update of our integrated resource plan, and that is a very, very intricate exploration of supply and demand conditions over the next 20 years, and what really will the effects of climate change will be. How much will demands go up because of population decrease, stay steady because people have incorporated water efficiency into their lives? Looking at all these different inputs and how you ensure reliability. Our goal as water managers is to not be in the condition that we're in on the state water project right now. So 15%, it, as a region, 15%, I guess part of what the state has to do and what the governor has to do is look statewide and say, what is a number that I can say that works for the entire state? Part of what Governor Brown was able to, or did during his drought, because every governor gets a drought, he used to make it 2 if he's reelected, we'll see. So will these so there's a lot of this that's local, right? Different folks have made different investments. San Diego has invested a lot in desal, and they have some of the most. They've invested in desal. They've invested in Colorado River water. They're gonna make a huge. The region as the city is gonna make a huge investment in recycled water, and they have very expensive water rates. They don't want to have to tell their folks, cut by 15% because they've made these huge investments. And so regionally, statewide, you have to say what works for the entire region. There are certain parts of the region that are going to have to cut more than 15%, but there are certain parts of the region that may not have to cut 15%, but you kind of have to pick a number. So it's a little bit of a tricky question. I will say that to what Richard was asking about when we first got on, which is the severity of the conditions on the state water project in areas that don't have other water supplies, the state, if it has a 0% allocation, and if you don't have other supplies that you can turn to, the state is considering what is called only providing health and human safety water. And health and human safety water, the number that they've given for that is 55 GPCD. So if you remember what I showed here, that we've done a fantastic job becoming more water efficient, and we're at 127. So 55 is significant, right? That would be a pretty major cut. That's not 15% for some of these areas that may face that. I can't do the math, but it's huge, right? So you're talking about no outdoor water use and at all, and cutting back on your indoor water use. And there are parts of the state that have been, not because of a state call, but my understanding is that there's parts of the state that have their water agencies have been forced to cut them to about 55. So that's already happening. And there's parts of Southern California where we could see this happening in the next couple of months, depending on how things play out on the project. So, you're right, 15% may not seem like much, but it's you kind of just got to pick a number, I guess. Mm-hmm. That's probably not the answer that necessarily you'd hear from the state, but.
Great. No, that's enlightening.
Sorry, it's kind of a long-winded answer.
No, it's okay. It's a complicated question. All right, great. So a couple more questions here. Residential replacement of impermeable pavement, driveways, sidewalks, etc., with permeable material seems like an easy way to better capture rainwater, and rooftop solar panel overnight dew for aquifer recharge. Is this being implemented? I think that's part of some what Measure W is going towards, right? Is removal of permeable or impermeable surfaces. Is that something that you all are focusing in on?
Yeah, no, that's not really at Metropolitan's. Our stormwater projects are looking more at our stormwater capture projects. This isn't, I apologize, but I don't really know. I don't think it's that. I think it's a little bit more active capture. I think they have to include the spreading basins and stuff like that. I think their project that have, the bioswales and things like that. I don't think just the permeable landscaping would qualify, or permeable, driveways or whatever would qualify, because I don't know that they would capture enough for, but I'm not really sure. So sorry.
Okay. It's just like a scale thing kind of.
Yeah, it's just, you kind of look at what the actual, opportunity for capture is. Now, certainly, you don't, these it's expensive as part of it. The permeable it's expensive, so you have to look at what the water supply benefit is, because if we're going to be funding these things, we have to look at the water supply benefit and funding the portion that is a water supply benefit versus the myriad other benefits that stormwater capture provides.
Right. Another question from Peter. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your last name, Peter. My apologies. It says, what can we do to get the governor to reconsider the second Delta tunnel? The original proposal was for 3 tunnels, which was then negotiated down to 2 before the current governor cut it down to 1 after a very short time in office.
Yeah, so to reconsider and have it be no tunnels? Is that the getting, or
I think
lowering it from 2, or at any rate.
Rebecca, the question is, this is Peter Kavunas.
Yeah.
The question is, 1 tunnel is less, it's less reliable, it's less water for Southern California, while it has the same environmental impact during construction. Building 2 tunnels is obviously better. Going down from 2 tunnels down to 1 tunnel cost us the friendship and partnership with Kern County Water Agency, and yet it was a political decision that was predetermined and left Southern California hanging. So what can we do to push it back up to 2 tunnels? Thank you.
That's a really tough question. I think part of the challenge with the Delta conveyance project is that there's a lot of very impassioned opinions about it across the state, and it varies largely based on region, and there's not statewide a lot of there's a lot of support in it based on your region, and there's a lot of opposition to it based on your region. And so finding as in a political position like the governor's office, it's a really hard position to navigate politically. So, and there's just a lot of distrust. So how you navigate that, it's a tough one. I mean, obviously Metropolitan supported 2 tunnels, but the governor went down to 1, and we support that as well. I mean, there's water supply benefits to 1 as well. You're not off about the cost, so I don't really know. I don't really know how to answer that, quite honestly. I mean, it's a tough one, but I think politically it is a very, very real challenge. And I think if you look at Governor Brown's challenge with that, you could look and you could see his support, but after him, looking for a statewide leader who backed it with the strength, the vigor and that he gave it, you have to go pretty far down the list to find a statewide officer who supported it the way he did. So it's a touchy one politically. So good luck if you're trying to convince them, because Metropolitan couldn't.
Oh, thank you, Rebecca. I don't have any hope. I think that was a real disservice after 10 years of leadership, counting 2 from Governor Schwarzenegger, to bring us to the point where 2 tunnels could go forward. it was a real blow to Southern California. And I wanted the audience to be aware of that. I agree with everything you've said tonight. I think you're a credit to Metropolitan.
Thank you.
All right, great. We have another question from Jan Bush. The Delta Tunnel project will impact and degrade the already deteriorated Bay Delta ecosystem and economy. You mentioned Metropolitan's goal in funding the Bay Delta Tunnel is to receive reliable water supplies for storage. Is that reservoir storage in the Central Valley? What protections will Metropolitan directly fund for Bay Delta ecosystem improvements?
Well, there's already funding for Bay Delta ecosystem improvements. So some of those projects are happening through, California Eco Restore. I think part of the challenge with the tunnels is a little bit of distrust. I think that's a big challenge with it. I mean, I think there is a sense that that folks are not going to stand by. There's a sense, particularly in the Bay Delta region, that folks aren't going to stand by their word that only I don't have it's been a while since I've talked about this, so I don't have the numbers in front of me, but in terms of how much would, the limitations on how much would be captured and moved through the Delta, there is a perception that more would be captured and moved than what we have said publicly and what the governor has said publicly. And to that, I would say the state determines how much water can move through the state water project. They follow the rules of the BIOPS. Those conditions are set through these, through this lengthy process. So, when these allocations that we see are set by the state based on those rules. So I get that there's a level of distrust, and it's hard to get through that kind of emotional reaction. But like I said, what I would say is, they have been following those rules. So it's certainly for me hard to see where they would suddenly stop following the rules and put a whole bunch of water through the tunnels that they have said that they wouldn't. And there's the understanding has always been that that the Delta conveyance is not intended to move more water to Southern California. It's to move it in a better way, in an actually less environmentally disturbing way that doesn't cause the reverse flows in the Delta that have been so detrimental to species with the reverse flows. There's also the challenges of potential earthquakes and the conditions that those an earthquake would cause to the entire Delta and to the water supply. So the way that we have always viewed the tunnels is that this is a better way to move water through the Delta that is in fact more environmentally sustainable, and the urgency for it is heightened by climate change, because we are seeing these big flows, these big storms, these big flows that come through the river, and that water will no longer be stored in snowpack. So the way to capture that water and move it into storage is through the tunnels. You can't capture and move that amount of water through the current Delta. So like I said, I know that the concern is there's a lot of lack of trust, and I get that when you have that it becomes very emotional, but I think there's every indication based on the science that's out there that this is the best way to address both the species questions and the climate change resilience questions, and recognize that, hey, they've followed the rules. They have been following the rules. They're not going to stop following the rules because they have a different infrastructure project that they're working with.
Okay, I know we're at our time here. Rebecca, would you mind taking like the 2 remaining questions we've got? Do you have a couple more minutes?
Yeah, no, sure. I just
All
heard
right.
my kids get home though, so they may come barging in, but we'll be okay.
Okay, and we can end whenever you're ready. The last 2 questions, one is by Karen Rosenthal, who asks, is there enough water available for cities to fulfill their regional housing construction quotas?
Well, that's part of what Metropolitan's integrated resource plan is about. It's about looking at what the potential increased demand is based on the growth of cities, and then looking at what our supply picture is based on climate change. So and other factors as well, like these potential challenges to groundwater based on CECs. So there is based on how we manage it, right? So there is plenty of water for everyone based on how we manage it. So if we there's and how we look at this and how we determine this is all what we as water planners and water managers do. This is what Metropolitan does. So we can conceivably have a supply, we could say, we as a region have determined that what we want to do is invest infinite amount of money in desalination. Now, we're not going to do that. But point is that there is water, there are ways of managing through this. And what we need to determine, and what we're determining, is what is the most sustainable way of managing the resources that we have and investing in new resources. Again, Metropolitan's big investment is going to be in recycled water, but you have to have water to recycle. You can't recycle nothing. You need a certain level of water quality to be able to recycle. So, again, we still we'll be relying some on our imported supplies. That's from the supply side. Now, from the demand side, Las Vegas is recently announced that they're banning all ornamental turf. So anything that is not functional, like for sporting events or for sporting activities, anything that's ornamental turf will be banned. Southern California could conceivably consider something like that, not just incentivizing its removal, but banning it. So these are different things that there's enough water. It's based on how you manage it. So short answer, yes, there is enough water for new housing projects. It's a matter of how we manage all of these supplies and demands.
Okay, great. And then the last question from John Heitkamper. He says, I thought I read that the Colorado River apportionments are going to be renegotiated in the coming years. Is that right? Can you discuss the dynamics? And how does population growth in Arizona, Nevada, et cetera, factor into this?
So I don't know that they will actually lower the apportionment. I mean, there's let me go to a slide on that I have here somewhere. Am I still sharing my screen?
You are, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I have a bunch of extra slides in case. Okay, here we go. No, this is like me dropping. Okay, sorry. There's a whole bunch of, here we go. All right. So I don't know that they'd actually change these numbers, but there's certainly recognition that this. Oh, never mind. I don't have the slide. I thought I did. Oh, here it is. Oh, never mind. No, I don't. Sorry. There's certainly recognition that that there's not the amount of water going through the Colorado River that produce these apportionments. Now, will they actually change those numbers? I don't know, but I mean, those are pretty entrenched, but there is a recognition that everybody will have to reduce the amount of water that they receive from the Colorado River. So they need to decrease demands. Everybody's going to have to reduce their demands, and collectively, there is an interest in investing in new supplies and growing the pie. So the recycled water project that Rupam's going to talk to you about, Arizona and Nevada are investing in that. And they're investing in that with the anticipation that Metropolitan will reduce its Colorado River deliveries, and they can benefit from those reduced deliveries. Some of that water would then go to them. And there's a way of doing that where Southern California, that happens in wet years in California, so that that Southern California is not hurt by that, because this is water from this recycled water project would be a regular and consistent supply. So there's investing in supplies like that, and then there's investing in conservation, and that's conservation. Again, in urban areas, and again in agricultural areas as well. And I think there is a recognition across certainly the lower basin that the pie is shrinking, and everybody is going to take less. Whether these actual numbers change, I don't know. I don't know about that, but there is that recognition, and what that looks like is going to be negotiated. It's a tough one, but in the lower basin, there's absolutely that recognition, and you can see it here. I mean, look at the deliveries that there were in the 90s. Those deliveries, that 4.4, California's had record low deliveries last year from the Colorado River. We put a ton of water in Lake Mead, storing a lot of water in Lake Mead because we didn't need to take that water because of those lower demands, and those lower demands were lower demands in Southern California that I showed you, and lower demands in ag as well. So everybody in California took less water from, and I wish I had the number in front of me. I think it was like 3.6 million acre feet that California took from the Colorado last year. So we're already, and all that water was left in Lake Mead. So we're already doing less now, and same with Arizona and Nevada. They both left water in Lake Mead as well. So again, as those cities are growing, is there enough water for them? Again, it's about how we manage the supplies that we have, and
All right, great. Thanks, Rebecca. So, it's been alluded to a few times tonight that we're going to be having another dialogue on a similar topic on the Regional Recycled Water Program by one of your colleagues, Rupam Soni, and that's going to be on Monday, December 13th. So again, please sign up for our newsletter and check out our social media or our website just to make sure that you're able to join us for that one too, and we can answer some of our more, some more of our questions about water conservation and water recycling, and kind of build out this picture we have of the state of water in Southern California. Rebecca, you've been so kind with lending us your time, extra time, and your expertise. I just wanted to thank you again so much for being with us tonight, and we can wrap it up. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, and I will say I apologize that I don't have all of the answer. No, nobody does, but I wanted to get back to my email, because if you ever have any additional questions that you that you'd like answered, please feel free to email me, and I can get it to the true source matter experts.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, and everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, and everyone have a great night. Take care.